everyone. Welcome, and thanks for having us, by the way. If just a quick, do we have any superhero fans or supervillains? Fine too. It's a safe space. So we got a few. So there you go. There's a good one. Wonder Woman's a great example. If I were to give you, if I were to say origin story, what would your definition of origin story be?
How something happens to someone to change their life and move it in a new direction.
What happens to someone to change their life, move in a new direction? Perfect. I would say perfect answer, right, Drea?
Yes, absolutely.
So I want to ask about your origin story, because it's very much rooted in superheroes and supervillains. Tell us a little bit about where you got started.
So thank you so much. When I think about origin stories, especially when we're reflecting on our careers, of course we have multiple special and impactful events that happen to us in our lifetimes. That's true for everybody. When it comes to our professional careers, I think that we have an origin story. I think that we have maybe one or a few events that happens to us in graduate school or in training, or maybe it's our first job as an early career psychologist, and it shapes how we see ourselves, it shapes how we see our professional identity, and much like superhero origin stories, it builds our superhero mission, or what I call our call to action. So when you're asking about my origin story, I think about how I started in psychology and the different challenges and barriers and internal supervillains I experienced that really shaped my journey. In graduate school, I actually went to a wonderful graduate program in San Diego, the Joint Doctoral Program, and I went to graduate school in the same city that hosted Comic-Con, which was a huge deal for me. I was a closeted geek, basically. Growing up, I read comic books, and I was introduced to Batman, the animated series, which...
So let's talk about that, because you're actually starting in grad school, but your origin story might even date back much earlier than that. When did you start to find a fascination with specifically psychology?
Yes. So in terms of the very first series of events that I experienced for my career, I was 12 years old. I was watching cartoons. Batman the Animated Series was what I considered my the gateway into additional comic books and sci-fi and fantasy. And for me, superheroes, including Batman, they were the first detectives. They were the first people in my life to understand human behavior, to look at clues and cues in each other to better understand motivation. Why would somebody do something harmful to somebody else, or why would somebody protect somebody? Why, as a child, would an event really shape and create your future? So I started to become fascinated with that whole superhero origin narrative, as well as the landscape of comics. And I put that down for a little bit. Now I think comics and superheroes are a very common part of our pop culture. I feel as though we are really blessed right now to have so many narratives in terms of superheroes be a part of our lives. When I was growing up, that wasn't the case. And so I felt a bit kind of a fish out of water, a little bit odd. I went into graduate school with, I'm sure as most people experienced, a real sense of focus, and I had all these ideas about all the things I wanted to do. I wanted to save all the children and find all the treatments, and it's not without challenges and barriers. And one of the very first professional chasms I experienced was the mismatch between who I felt I was and then who I felt that the field needed me to be.
Why is that?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily a product of our field. Our field is very inclusive and accepting. The reason why I suggest that people look into their origin stories is that when we are experiencing challenges, when we are experiencing a lot of stress, we begin to revisit our origin story and kind of our original villains. And for me, it was my imposter syndrome villain. So I call this character a villain because, in a way, this character would resurface or appear during really stressful times, and graduate school has multiple stressful events involved, anything from comps to your master's degree to your dissertation, and there's a lot of pressure to fit in, not just to who you believe you need to be in the field, but also to the pathways that we know are successful. And so I think that I was beginning to experience some of those conflicts. And when I say imposter syndrome, I'm referring to a lot of the thoughts that we have in kind of those beginning stages, like, I'm not sure if I can do this, I don't know if I should be here, everybody else seems so much smarter than I am, was there a mistake in my application process, like, how in the heck did I get here? And the thing about what I would consider either supervillains or even our kryptonite, if you will, is that it tends to be a common thread, so it will follow you around. And I would say even on my way here tonight, I experienced that imposter syndrome, supervillain voice coming in, just in the back of my mind, reminding me, like, are you sure you're supposed to do this? And maybe there was an error, and all of those negative, catastrophic distortions that many of us experience. And when it comes to our careers, they can be particularly damaging. Most of the time, they're distortions, right? So they're inaccurate or they're exaggerations. But I would say that when I was experiencing those thoughts and those doubts in the beginning of my career, I really believed it. And I didn't know the name of this term then, but what I was experiencing was psychic disequilibrium, which is just a psychology word that the poet Adrienne Rich termed. And it's the experience you have when you are not seeing your identity in the world that you're perceiving or experiencing. So a lot of times this happens with media, when you don't see folks like you, your background, your culture, your identity, in the primary narrative that you're perceiving or experiencing. In my discipline, at least in my early years of graduate school, I really wasn't able to see my future. I really wasn't able to see people that looked like me with my background, with my interests, with my history of immigration, with my history of discrimination, with my history of just various family and cultural struggles, not having that foundation, or having the future orientation and insight to see that, like, okay, I could see my future here. So those, I would say, distortions began to build, and I really wasn't sure that this field was for me, to be quite honest.
So what changed? What put you down that path of the hero's journey, taking that first step forward and realizing, I realize you said that you, even tonight, felt a little bit of that, but clearly you know what you're talking about. So what gave you that little push that you needed to move forward?
A lot of it had to do with understanding what the origin story was. So when we face some of those internal questions or struggles or doubts, there's usually some basis for that. There's some foundation for that. And so I did a little bit of internal exploration to better understand where are these distortions coming from. And honestly, what was happening at the time was that I wasn't my authentic self. I had so much anxiety about it, and my superhero comic book hobby / pastime was very much a predominant part of my identity, and I didn't feel at the time that those could be integrated. Why
is that? Explain that a little bit.
I think it's mostly that, again, I didn't know about the full variety of careers that we could have, and I didn't necessarily think that that's something that you could integrate into your career. It did take an actual comic book, a published comic book, for me to really understand that the integration of fictional narrative and psychological science could actually not just be fulfilling for me as a professional, but could help other people to learn the things that we know and to implement some of the things that we know and create this accessible, more approachable part of our field.
What book was that? How did it help you?
So that was a comic book called Batgirl, and early on during graduate school, I was asked to do some consultation, and I was doing this type of consultation as what I would call a side hustle, which we should talk about.
Yeah, we're totally going to mention that. You're talking about Gail Simone's
Yes.
Batgirl. So if you aren't aware, if you're not a comic book fan or you're not aware, Drea actually has the distinction of having been written into canon in Batgirl. Gail Simone, the writer, needed advice, sought it from Drea, and now suddenly Dr. Andrea Letamendi is Batgirl's therapist in Batgirl. Which sort of shone a spotlight on you that you weren't sure you were ready for.
Right. Well, at the time, I was experiencing kind of that identity chasm. I had this like side work and consultation with writers, and I was going to Comic-Con, and I was speaking on panels, and I was trying to bring psychology into a field or into other spaces where I thought it would be relevant and would be fulfilling for me, but I was still hesitant to fully believe that was something that was acceptable. And then the comic book was published, and it was during a time when DC Comics was actually publishing a lot of new titles and created or trying to create a larger audience. And what's important about that is when you look at the comic, I know not everybody reads comics, but when you look at the comic, certainly for me there was a sense of just personal validation that I had made an impact on this writer and that she had included this character. But beyond that, beyond my identity integration or fulfillment, there was the larger milestone, I believe, of showing our field in a way that was very accurate, in a way that was positive, in a way that would help others seek help. And that was because the character was written based off of a real psychologist. So rather than have the character be evil or harmed or turned into a villain, this character was helping a superhero. This character was operating within a clinical setting. This character was helping in a way that was accurate and in a way that was positive to our field. And so I felt that was in honor of what we do, and I felt that it was also important to see a female psychologist who's a person of color who is establishing a role for herself that's clearly empowered, that is positive, and that is in alignment with the superhero narrative, which was all kind of what I was trying to do in my own, internally with my own identity. So it was, I think, for me, the end point or the culmination of the origin story was really for me pretty pivotal.
Absolutely, and you like you said, your character is called Doctor without actually being a villain. So
right, you don't see a lot of that.
That's a big deal, especially in Gotham City. So let's talk about the side hustle a little bit. If I say the word side hustle to you, what does that mean, and why is that important for someone in your field?
So I think of the side hustle as a way that we energize our passion, our talent, and some of our creativity to fulfill ourselves professionally. So the hustle part of the side hustle is really key. If you are truly exercising a side hustle, you are there on weekends, you're there in the evenings, you're really putting a lot of your blood, sweat, and tears into whatever it is that you're doing. And I think, it varies depending on what people's main hustle is. But oftentimes, the side hustle, I think, helps us to deal with the burnout and compassion fatigue that we might experience on the day-to-day. So if on a day-to-day basis you're a practitioner or you're a researcher or you're doing both, often with psychologists we have multiple main hustles. We have multiple hats that we're constantly interchanging and focusing on. I see the side hustle not necessarily as a source of revenue generation, but as a way for us to be able to fulfill some of that creative passion and energy and bring us back into our professional identities, why we got into this in the first place. So oftentimes the side hustle could, you could break even, you could even lose money because your side hustle is having you travel all over the world or the country, or you're spending so much time doing it that there's an opportunity cost.
So Drea has a podcast that's weekly-ish.
Supposed to be weekly.
We record every week. We don't. And it is called The Arkham Sessions, where we take a look at every episode of Batman the Animated Series in chronological order from the very critical eye of a clinical psychologist. So she is legitimately watching characters evolve over 95 plus episodes. How have they gotten better? How have they gotten worse? What is wrong with them? What's right with them? What's wrong with Batman? One of the things that you've made it very clear on the show is that we don't charge for the podcast. We don't have merch that you can buy from us. We don't do any of that. And it's very important for you to let people know that you're not asking for money. You just want to disseminate this knowledge.
Right. We've used the term give psychology away in the past. I know the Monitor had a feature on the idea of giving psychology away, and I felt like that was such a great way to describe what we do, especially with the podcast, that our whole mission with that is to increase the public knowledge about psychological science and mental health, perhaps instill help-seeking among folks who may not otherwise seek treatment, to debunk myths. I think that in the current era of this interesting social media age, if we have any kind of impact, whether it be the fact that you're a social media influencer, you're a key opinion leader, you're somebody who other folks listen to, online especially, then I do feel that there is a level of opportunity or even responsibility to disseminate what we know to folks so that they're better informed. And so the avenue that I use for that happens to be Batman. That is the way that I disseminate psychological science. And it's actually really easy in the sense that there's just so much psychological science in the superhero mythology. And what we do on a semi-weekly basis is that, yes, we start with a simple comic book character that this is a form of a cartoon. This is the form of an animated series from the 90s. And yet we're able to lift out the psychological science, anything from trauma to compassion fatigue to the impact of depression, suicide, the availability of treatments, the types of treatments, and we really have covered a myriad of topics over the course of the last couple of years with a very, I think, tangible, approachable starting point, which is the superhero. So I've found that that is a way that I have energized my own curiosity and passion because that's very near to me. That's a space that I feel very comfortable in. If I'm at Comic-Con, I kick off my shoes. I feel I'm with my people. I feel very at home. And then that inspires me and brightens me up to the idea of connecting with others through that mythology.
You've done panels at conventions before, and I'm wondering if this might have anything to do with the way that you are so now free and open to discuss your passion and your profession together. where you have equated real life human beings with people that we would generally think of as superheroes. So, and I think that those panels were always very powerful because you would literally be talking, you would show a slide at a convention and you would say, look, there's Batman swinging into Gotham City where there's an explosion happening. How many people think that this is over the top, out of the ordinary? No one would do this. And everybody would put their hands up. And then she would immediately show a video of an IED attack in Afghanistan or whatever, and you would watch soldiers go right in, and she'd be like, these people really exist. And I'm wondering if any of that had anything to do, because you also worked at the VA for a period of time, did dealing with people who really do not consider themselves superheroes by any stretch of the imagination, but exhibit those traits, have anything to do with you also opening up?
Absolutely. And I think there's a misunderstanding or just this belief that superheroes are invulnerable. And usually there is, within each character, their own origin story, their own traumatic experiences, and something that they overcome. And so I find that whether we're working with veterans or we're working with folks who have early childhood trauma, folks that are working through their current stress, there's often a common connection, there's a common thread to the superhero narrative. We experience something that is difficult to deal with, it impacts us, but then it shapes us, and oftentimes it becomes a part of our identity. And I really believe in trauma-informed care. That's the approach that I take with a lot of my work, and I feel as though the superhero narrative is especially attuned and in alignment with trauma-informed care, that we understand somebody through their experiences, good, bad, traumatic, and we better understand how they see themselves through their own history of trauma. And that's honestly how I see the superhero narrative. In the same way, there's some kind of call to action or mission that's associated with the next steps. Now that you've integrated that traumatic history, what's next for you? How do you see success? How do you see your next mission or your next stage in life? And so there's a lot of parallels there with some of these fictional stories. And frankly, to be completely honest, those fictional stories have been universal, approachable, and make some of the more difficult conversations we have more accessible. And when we talk about conventions and Comic-Con and some of these spaces where you normally wouldn't see psychologists operate or kind of feel this comfortable in, I think that's where this has been the most effective, where we've been able to just bring more information to folks and provide education and awareness. And I think that, for me, has been the integration of everything through graduate school, through the imposter syndrome, through some of those barriers. That, to me, has been what has always been this common thread.
I'm wondering, you mentioned that appearing in Batgirl suddenly shone a spotlight on you that you weren't sure you were ready to reveal to your colleagues and your peers. You were afraid of what their reactions would be. What were their reactions?
I was dealing with my own internal supervillains, and I had so many negative, catastrophic forecasting thoughts about what would happen. Most of my colleagues were incredibly warm and inquisitive and very accepting of the idea that we could have some involvement and participation in something like comic book narratives. And so I really experienced the embrace of this kind of intersection of our work. And that was really fulfilling to see. Again, because we kind of experience within our early careers our own understanding of where this path should take us. And some paths are very well marked with signage and with milestones, and we know exactly where to go. And I think that we're not necessarily 100% sure that we're confident in those pathways. And so I think with especially now with energizing early career psychologists and graduate students and folks who are interested in this field and want to see themselves in this field. I think that this type of innovation, this type of ingenuity or creativity is really what will help us to continue to be as impactful as we've been. So I sort of have done this with comic books and with consultation. I've been in writers' rooms. I've worked with folks who are writing scripts. I've worked with folks who are writing comic books. That has been what has helped me find this identity. But I think that the idea here is to pivot in ways, shift in ways that you find are fulfilling your passion, but also could create spaces for us as psychologists that maybe didn't exist before. And I think that that is kind of exciting. That's exactly what we should be thinking about doing in terms of how we can impact other fields and disciplines, and to just to ensure and assert our expertise, our importance. I think now we have so much information available to us at all times with social media, and that's a double-edged sword, right? Because that means that anybody can say anything about psychological science, about our field, about what should and shouldn't be done. And
You can go to Wikipedia or WebMD.
don't go to WebMD.
I'm saying you can, not that you should. That's the problem that the writers have. I mean, I think you're sort of getting to it. It's like, how important is it for you and your field, the psychological field, to be represented at the table in a writer's room, if it's on TV or in a movie or in a book or comic book, whatever, video game?
I think it's relevant, and I think that we have so many options for ourselves that if it is something that we feel is consistent and in alignment with our professional values, then yes, absolutely. It could be considered, in my mind, almost a professional obligation to speak up, whether that means you're seeing in your social media feed something that's inaccurate or could be damaging or is a misconception about our work or about mental health. Absolutely, I think it's our responsibility to be involved in that discussion.
Is there something you regularly see that you just go, not again?
Well, we've always seen that, right? That hasn't changed. I think what has shifted is that we have the ability to interact more, and we have the ability to be in those spaces and have a seat at the table where we did not have that opportunity before. And one example I can think of when you mention creative narrative in TV and film, 13 Reasons Why is a recent example where we see a story. Have folks seen? I'm not going to give any spoilers, but 13 Reasons Why is a Netflix television series about a teenage girl who dies by suicide. And the entirety of the series is told through her audio recordings, which is almost seen as an audio recording of her suicide note. And it's a very compelling story. And in fact, so many youth and adults, parents, instructors, teachers, psychologists have seen this and are talking about it. It's really one of those television series that has created a lot of buzz.
Has the buzz been all positive, all negative, or a mix?
It's a mixture. But I would say that's an example where, because we know what we know, we have the expertise that we have, I do feel that it's an obligation that we have to enter that discussion in some way and to be able to debunk myths or dispel myths, to be able to ensure that folks know where they can get help if suicide is a consideration. Because one of I would say the number one failures of that show, as compelling as it is that there's not a lot of information about where to go for help if one is feeling suicidal. And so that's where I think we have a huge responsibility. In terms of having a seat at the table, like in a writer's room or a consultation, that being a part of a practice, I think that if we have that particular skill and we have the knowledge and it's within our professional skill set, then that would be another example of how we can impact other disciplines and fields. So I think it's a combination of exercising your own passion, so whatever is energizing and mobilizing you to do what you're doing, that golden thread that follows you around throughout your professional trajectory, and how much you want to impact other disciplines and fields. And I would say more and more, it is going to be invaluable. It's going to be important for us to have a seat at those tables and to be able to influence and impact other fields and disciplines, because psychological science is everywhere. And so I feel as though we should be represented everywhere, not through a conduit, not through some other process passively. In addition to journal articles, I think we should also be having those person-to-person discussions and having those day-to-day consultations with other professionals.
Well, can I just ask one question? And I know that we wanted to take some questions from you folks, if you have any. But how receptive, specifically the psychological sciences? Because if Tom Cruise wants to make an action movie, they bring a gun trainer onto the set readily. They instantly know we need to have this expert, this expert, this expert. How receptive have writers been to someone in psychology, or do they feel like, I can just write whatever and let someone else figure it out? Like, have you noticed that they've been more and more receptive to you?
Yes, and I found that there's a very positive interaction, and there's a very positive response when you do offer that expertise, and it's going to take some time as well. So I just, with many of our experiences there, I can always think back to the handful of times that I did feel that my work was discounted, or that what I had to say wasn't included in the final edit, or that I had other professionals tell me that my perspective or my particular profession wasn't needed for whatever project that was.
But for you, as long as you say it, as long as you have told them you're doing it wrong, if they do it wrong, you can say, I told them they're doing it wrong.
I'm not sure that your first statement or recommendation would be that they're doing it wrong, but yes, there's a way to give some honest feedback, and it depends on other creatives and their level of receptiveness to our field, and honestly, most of my experiences have been quite positive. I have a few kind of like lessons learned when I think back on the trajectory, like things I had wished that I had done better, or things that I wished that I had done differently. And what I would honestly, like, if I had does anyone watch Doctor Who? If I had a TARDIS and I had a way to go back into time and fix things, I would have said no to more things throughout my early career. We tend to want to please everybody, and we have an eagerness to perform, we have an eagerness to be perfect. And so I think I said yes to way too many things. And some of those things that I said yes to ended up not being as important to finding this professional identity. And it's, hindsight is 20/20. Now I understand what those were. At the time, I didn't. And the other thing that I wish I had done was added a variety to my tool belt. So I wish that I had taken more courses in communication, in media, in writing, in some of the work that you do, for instance, because you don't get that practical learning. You don't get a lot of that learning when you're working with other disciplines, and they know it. And I think if you speak their language and you're able to rub elbows with them with using their language and using some of their cultural cues, then they're much more receptive. One of my nightmare stories was when I was asked to do the Dr. Drew show. Do folks remember this show, CNN Headline News, talking heads, often arguments about news stories every night?
Very salacious arguments.
Yes. And so at the time, and that's one of the things I said yes to when I was asked to do it, because I thought, how would I say no to this? It's televised. It's Dr. Drew. He's a good practitioner. He should know. Like he knows how to handle our profession. And what ended up happening is that it was difficult to acculturate to that production, and one of the reasons why is they really just kind of got me there and sat me down, and I had very little instruction, experience, knowledge in communicating clearly, with brevity, looking into the camera in the right way, speaking to the other talking heads and not talking over them, even how to like use a microphone, all different sort of technical things that I had wished that I had learned how to do so that I didn't lose track of what I was supposed to say and how I was supposed to say my message correctly and accurately. And I felt that I needed to represent the field and to speak to psychological science. But they were not interested in psychological science, right? They were interested in arguing and creating this element of watchable television. So for me, I felt as though it was a clear, it was a clear way for me to understand that this necessarily wasn't my niche, but it also allowed me to learn that there were things that I wish that I had studied more in my psychological career so that I could become better at it.
I want to give people an opportunity to ask questions if you have any. Anyone? Yes, sir. I think actually we have, is there a... Sure. Whatever makes you comfortable.
First of all, thank you very much. Thank you both for being here. I ran across this word. I teach comparative religion among a few other subjects, and I ran across a word called euhemerism, which states that the actual mythological stories of ancient times, or even today, are based on actual events. Say, for instance, the Nephilim in Genesis chapter 6, the superheroes, where gods come down, angels come down from heaven and have sex with women and have children who are called men of fame. Hercules later being in Greek mythology one of those individuals. I'm wondering if you ever factored that into your psychoanalysis of the writers of the various superhero shows.
Thank you for that question, and thank you for being here. So is the question that have I thought about that particular mythology, so extended the superhero mythology to that, that type of mythology, the ancient gods?
Yes, being based on actual events according to that word, euhemerism.
Yeah, I have not, and I feel as though there are similar parallels as you're describing that. I have a little bit of exposure to some of that mythology. There certainly are parallels, and I would say that the degree to which we understand that mythology and connect with that mythology is the degree to which I would utilize that knowledge and utilize that energy, because I think that that's really important, right? To kind of speak to what we know.
Yeah, I would say that especially when we're talking about Superman and Batman and characters like that, we do know that the writers were drawing from a lot of their own experiences, either being, Jewish creators who felt alienated in the environment, and then the farm boy attitude. Like, I know that they were writing that character; they were just writing a superhuman version of that character, but they were definitely sort of building on what they knew. Right?
Oh, yeah, just piggyback on that. An example, I think, would be Superman, who came from another planet,
Yeah.
and is like an individual who's a hero here. And I think one of the other, actually two of the other stories we have here in our own pop culture is Paul Bunyan.
Oh, sure.
A giant, or Jack the Beanstalk, which seems to suggest what is stated in Genesis chapter 6 and later in the mythology of the Nephilim. But anyway, I was just kind of curious if that was ever in your orbit, that you were psychoanalyzing or examining the minds of the writers who came up with these things.
What is interesting is we do know that, Superman is essentially the story of Moses. The orphan who's being cast out by his parents when the people of his planet want him destroyed, sent down a river through space to Earth, becomes a godlike figure to a certain group of people Americans, and humans. But I mean, there are a lot of parallels to religion and those sorts of things in those stories as well. Anybody? Question? Yes, ma'am.
So you mentioned we should be represented everywhere as psychologists, and a lot of what you've talked about is like narrative. So it's created fiction. With our political situation the way it is, we've all kind of been dumped into kind of a reality type of TV show, and there's been some controversy.
I like that.
Pardon me?
I'd like to think it were that. I mean, that's a little bit more comforting if I think of this as a reality TV show.
Yeah, it's far too real for that. But what are your thoughts? Because I know there's been some controversy about the role of psychology and psychologists in expressing their views and their opinions, and that can relate to specific candidates or presidents, as well as even just how media is forming narratives that are influencing people.
Thank you so much for that question. I think it's a great question. I do believe that psychology, psychological science, and psychologists should be everywhere. And the reason I say that is that I think that that is a part of our professional value set and culture. It's part of our ethical system. Doesn't mean that I have to be everywhere, right? That would be unethical because I don't have expertise in all areas. So I think that we as a field should be everywhere in the sense that we're representing accuracy, evidence-based interventions, knowledge about access to treatments, knowledge about mental health. And so when I think about our sociopolitical environment and landscape, I think that it's still absolutely true that we have some participation in that. And it would depend on what your role is. Again, if you are a key opinion leader or you're a social media influencer, gosh, if you're on one of those shows and you are a talking head, then yes, I think that that's one way or various ways that you could impact how we're interfacing and working with that sociopolitical landscape. I do think that it depends on your discipline within psychology. That's the first thing I would say. And I would also, I would like to believe that all of us have our own professional, what I call my golden thread, or my professional value set that I take with me, and it's not going to change regardless of whether I'm in a writer's room or I'm at my day job helping therapists or I'm here tonight. My golden thread is the same. My job is to increase public awareness about psychological science, instill help-seeking, reduce stigma, and correct myths about psychology as much as I possibly can. I do that through Batman. I do that through my day job. And yes, if I'm faced with some kind of interaction that's related to what we're experiencing in politics, I think that there's some element of influence there. So I think it really depends on what it is that we're doing. For me, most of my interaction there has come from social media and ensuring that as much as I can, I'm disseminating fact and evidence. So if there's some kind of event that was harmful or violent or increased distress, then what do people need? They need resources. They need information about where to get help. They need information about how to volunteer. They need information about trauma treatments or interventions. That's what I'm there to do. Thank you for your question.
Hi, thank you so much for this presentation. It's been wonderful. I love the fusion of psychology and Batman. I like to think I'm the Dark Knight at times for obvious reasons. I'm tall. But seriously, I'm a clinical psychologist here at UCLA. And two-part questions. First, when do you decide your side hustle is your main hustle? And then in addition to that, how do you let your complete cultural background inform what your side hustle will be and your value? Because obviously I'm black, and as a black male psychologist, I find myself getting a lot of requests and different things that really can build my side hustle into a main hustle. And how have you used that to really inform your work?
Thank you so much for that question. So the first part of that is how to transform a side hustle into a main hustle. And I think it really depends on what your side hustle is. Frankly, some folks have a side hustle that is always intended to be their weekend thing or their evening thing. I don't know if they run an Etsy shop or they're making, like sometimes it's just what brings them great joy personally and maybe professionally, but will never be generating revenue for them and will never really be their main gig, so to speak. And so I think it really depends on that. And I would actually kind of link your first and second question, that for me, what started as a side hustle was some kind of personal need to engage in the passion, the hobbies, all the stuff that was really bringing me fulfillment and joy. And it wasn't enough. In fact, in grad school, I tried to kind of keep that separate and kind of on the side, and it was creating more distress because I wasn't my authentic self. I really wasn't an integrated self. So to the degree that you are experiencing that level of energy and passion and it begins to fold into your main work, I think that's a sign that it should be a part of your main work in some way. And my belief is that rather than try to force that or rather than try to create that, sometimes it just happens. Sometimes those connections build and you start to, more people come to you for help, for consultation, for whatever it is that you're helping them with, and that begins to build. And so the reason I think that's a part of your second question is that often the thing that we're doing that's fulfilling that passion is in huge part who we are, who we see ourselves as. And so that may include, for me, I had to come to terms with the idea that I didn't see folks like myself as scientist practitioners. I didn't know that that was an option for me. I came from a family that didn't know anything about this line of work. And so I had to really come to terms with, if I was going to create something or build this integrated profession, that it would end up being quite unique, but that it was very accepted and that I felt quite embraced by others in the field. So I think that the amount that you include your own self-identity into that process, the better. I'm not sure if I fully answered that question because I'm not sure what your side hustle is, but.
You did, but I'll give you a more specific
Yeah.
example. I find that in our field, of course, thank you. I find that in our field, there's so much focus on providing evidence-based treatments and being able to support communities, and I love it. But many times we're looking to support communities that don't reflect the people, that don't look like the people who we're actually serving. And so what I found, my side hustle, is I've developed a culturally responsive, trauma-informed, I specialize in working with kids who are traumatized. And so I developed a curriculum for educators that adapts evidence-based practices, trauma-informed evidence-based practices in a culturally responsive way. And my value is, in terms of my experience as a black man, has informed that and elevated the work that I've done. And so I'm wondering, from your experience, I'm assuming you're Latina, don't call me out.
I have a mixed heritage,
Okay, yeah.
so I have an Asian and Latino background.
Okay, whew, I was half right.
You're 3/4 correct.
Three-quarters correct. But I guess part of what I'm saying is, how does that piece of, here's one of the things, in grad school we don't learn business, we don't learn a lot of things that can really enhance our brand, for lack of a better way to say it, and that's a part of your brand. Your brand is that you bring this unique perspective of the world to the forefront, and you can adapt things that other people cannot adapt. And so how much do you leverage that to really build whatever your vision is for your future? And I guess that's where I'm at in my career.
I absolutely agree with you. I appreciate that you're willing to say that there are some areas that we could, that really could superpower what we do. We do amazing things. We are capable of amazing things, and if we just had a few more tools in our utility belt throughout our early careers and throughout graduate school, we could really do a lot with that. And I think what you're already doing is establishing that your identity, your culture, what you have learned along the way, and if I can insert some of the challenges that you've encountered with your identity, has helped you to understand how to help others. And that's very valuable in this field. And so I think that I would make the assumption as well that that is incredibly fulfilling when you're able to make that connection. And I think that that's okay for us to do. Because I think for some of us, we think, we go into this field to help others, and it's not about me, it's not about me, it's about them, it's about them. It's also about us. It has to be about us. Because we're constantly integrating ourselves. We're constantly developing ourselves and learning our own lessons. And if I can't figure out how to be in this society where we're being told that there's immigration bans, where we're being told that certain folks don't deserve the same rights of others, where we're told that women can't do certain things with their bodies, I have to integrate that with who I am as a person and how I am practicing in my field. And so I think that those are important lessons learned, and it's okay to bring that into the work that we do. And in fact, the way that you're describing the work that you're doing, it will definitely impact youth, youngsters, folks who haven't yet gotten there. So I appreciate the work that you're doing, and it sounds like you have your own golden thread. Yeah, thank you. And I need to get your card because I feel like we could definitely collaborate in some way.
Do we have any other questions?
I'm a graduate student, so I have a lot of questions, but I'll just limit myself to one. So you're talking about really bringing yourself into your work and your identity and really merging the two. So I guess I'm wondering, as far as like interventions, if you've ever really maybe used comic books or geekdom or other sci-fi, that kind of thing, with clients, especially since you work with young adults and children, it sounds like, or maybe what your thoughts are on that.
I think that's an excellent way to engage youths and gosh, with adults as well who have the same kind of interest and passion, especially when we think of evidence-based treatments for trauma. I know that this idea of an origin story, a kryptonite or a source of kryptonite, something that is a barrier that we've encountered, and then our call to action or our mission, that kind of arc is very universal, and so I often go back to that in terms of bringing in that superhero mythology or narrative into my work. And what I found, honestly, is that as passionate as I am about and as energized as I am about it, it may be that you encounter somebody who just doesn't have that same interest. So I wouldn't necessarily demand that everybody create comic books in therapy. That would be great therapy, but not for everybody, right? So I tend to think of it as a way to enhance the work, that if you're already good at it and you already know these stories, and we do this all the time with adults and with children, we look for allegories, we look for parallels in their story, in their narrative, and something that might be fictional because it's approachable, it's not threatening, it has usually a full arc, and so we can see that it's hopeful. And I think that that's a great way to engage and energize folks who might not be hopeful.
So it sounds like you've had a lot of support from colleagues in this going after your passion and finding your side hustle. Do you have any suggestions if you feel like people aren't supportive?
That's a great question. Did everyone hear it? So she asked if I've encountered colleagues or folks within the field that are not supportive.
If you have advice for people who might not have a side hustle that they would find support by their colleagues.
I think that if you know what your golden thread is that is consistent, no matter where you go, that will always be intact. And so if you encounter any kind of barrier or any kind of, I mean, I get questioned all the time. I often encounter, whether it's within our discipline or with other disciplines, invalidation, whether it's about comic books or not. I think that's kind of one of the great challenges about psychology. And I think that we carry this with us. This is not an easy field to be in because of so many different variations and perspectives that we're faced with, and that the media displays about us that a lot of times are not true. So I think we're constantly being faced with sometimes some negative interactions and some misperceptions. And when it's that personal, I've actually been told, I can give you a quick example, where I was working with a school and they had contracted me to go speak there and work with the parents and with their board. And I had given a proposal that included the superhero narratives. And I got a call and they said, you know, most of the parents here think that superheroes are violent and are a bad influence on their youth, and we are really apologetic, but we're not gonna have you here. And it was so invalidating, because it was, in my mind, telling me that what you're doing not only will not help us, but would be detrimental to our youth. And I felt quite the opposite. I was going to be there to speak about suicide prevention, to speak about emotional intelligence, ways to combat bullying, ways to address depression and anxiety. And so it was difficult to get that rejection, but that becomes a part of, that builds into your origin story. Of course, you know, the supervillain was back, like, see, I told you, no one wants this, no one cares about you and your superheroes and your work, and you should stop. That's what that imposter syndrome told me. So in the same way, I had to address those doubts within myself and to continue on. So I think as much as we're anticipating some of that rejection, we're also quite good with being, with our perseverance and with our persistence.
And I'll out you ever so slightly too, because at one point, you had complained, and it really came down to generational. Like you were like, well, I'm going to be here a while, and as long as I keep persevering, things change.
Yeah.
And so I feel like you'll be here a while. So the longer you keep doing your thing, the more accepted you'll find, because you'll be doing a room just like this where other people want to do the same thing you're doing or want to do something similar in a different field. So you did say things change and I'll be here when they're not.
Thank you for reminding me that I said that. Because sometimes we forget that that's absolutely true, that we have to push away some of those negative thoughts and distortions about what we're doing.
And start assimilating others into your...
Yes, just like the Borg. I would say that what I often do, even now, is to ask myself, this is what we do with clients a lot, like just make a reflection, almost a cognitive statement about what we're doing. And sometimes it's as simple as saying like, okay, so what is it that I'm doing? So when I'm with a client, why am I here? When I'm on the stage with you, like why am I doing this? When I'm at work, because somebody could not be here. That's why you're doing
that's right.
it. And so that follows me around as well, checking in with yourself with every professional step. Is this in alignment with my professional values? And why is it that I'm doing this particular thing? And I think that helps, especially in the face of negativity and doubt, that helps me to persevere and move forward. And I appreciate that you also mentioned the knowledge that I'm not going anywhere, right? And so I think that's important to remind ourselves. I think that as a field, that's an important thing to remind ourselves, right? Psychology and psychological science is not going anywhere. Like, we're not going away. We, in fact, need to grow and become more involved with other disciplines and other spaces. And we need to be accessible. I think we need to be approachable and
visible.
And I think it's also important to let other folks know that they too could be visible. So that visibility is really important as well.
It's also nice to have someone in your life who will remind you of the important things that you said. By the way, they're affianced. So that's good.
Yeah, so we'll be married at some point.
She told me that.
Are there any other questions before we wrap up for tonight? Yes, sir.
Hi, thank you. I'm actually a first-year undergraduate at UCLA, so I have like a ton of questions too. But I kind of wanted to know, because I'm considering the psychology field, and I kind of wanted to know what motivates you every day for your work, and what's your why you do what you do, and just what gets you up in the morning, and when you end up retiring or finishing, what do you want to be remembered for?
Wow. So I have a couple of responses to that. Thank you for being here and for being interested in the field. That's really important, and I'm glad that we could energize each other tonight, hopefully, and influence.
No pressure, though. Your answer
decisions.
might
we'll
just
see.
drain that. So please tell us.
So what I do as part of my my main hustle, I'm the director of clinical training at a mental health agency, and so I train and coach, consult with, and educate a number of therapists who deliver services that are evidence-based for youth, young adults. And I find that in our line of work, usually we experience a lot of burnout and compassion fatigue. And so I think that when I'm encountered with your question of like, day to day, what is that like? What keeps me energized and positive? It's honestly, it goes back to that question of what I it goes back to what has driven me from the very beginning. And a lot of that, and it's not necessarily enjoyable to think about. Some of it is very painful. Where did we start? What were our hardships? How did we get here? What did we have to overcome to get here? And I think there are some superhero narratives throughout that particular pathway. But for the most part, it's that we work very hard and we work in service to other people. And so at the end of the day, for me, it's important that those children, those young adults, those folks who are seeking help, that they are receiving quality services, that they are receiving the help that they deserve in the landscape of our current sociopolitical ups and downs, the chaos, the scares, the stress. I think a lot of us are in the same boat about how much distress we're experiencing on the day-to-day. So for me, it would be really about, did I take care of other people? Did I take care of myself? And so at the end of the day, it's important to do that check-in of like, did I take care of myself to the degree that I can look back on what it is that's important to me in this profession and feel like it's still intact? Because at that point that it's no longer intact, that you no longer feel that you have that influence or that impact, you no longer feel that you can mobilize yourself with that level of energy and with that level of faith, then it becomes problematic, and we really lose sight of what we're doing. And it's happened. I know it's happened to a lot of us, especially if you're a practitioner and you see a lot of hardship and you see a lot of trauma, and most of your work is about trying to be empathic and trying to be in service to those who are seeking help. We can't help but internalize some of those hardships, challenges, and trauma. And so I think that it's really a matter of doing that check-in for our self-care and our personhood, if you will, around who we are at the end of the day. Did I answer all of your 6 questions? We need you in this field, though, if you're considering it. Thank you for those questions.
And unless there are other questions, I think we'll wrap up for this evening. Did you want to have any closing remarks? Or, I mean, this has been wonderful, so enlightening and interesting and such a great perspective. I really appreciate, well, we really appreciate it. Is there any other questions?
I just
Okay.
wanted to thank the APA and Jessica Carson, who has been in touch with me over the course of the planning of this event, and to thank folks who took time out of their busy schedules to be here tonight and to be curious about ways we can innovate this field. I really appreciate that. And I will be around for a little bit if folks want to have further discussions. I'm on Twitter, at Arkham Asylum Doc is my Twitter handle. I'm very accessible that way. If you know about Arkham Asylum, then we may want to chat about that. And then I have some business cards if you would like for just exchanging at the end of the night. So thank you.
One last comment. I'd just like to say that this was worth missing game 1 of the final.
I mean, that's the bar, right? That's the bar.
You're streaming it somewhere. I don't speak sports ball, but that means a lot.
Well, so this is our inaugural pilot event of this sort. So things we didn't think about were parking and basketball because, you know, it's DC. We don't win anything. We really appreciate you guys coming out, and if you wouldn't mind taking the time to fill out a survey on your way out and let us know what you think. Be honest, because this, like I said, is a pilot. We need to learn from this experience and understand how we served you, how we didn't serve you, and what you'd like to see. So please take the extra moment. Also, we would like to give you guys the complimentary tickets to the convention in San Francisco next year.
Thank you.
So we figured, I mean, we could have given you tickets to this year, but it's all the way on the East Coast, so we figured San Francisco would be better. No worries.
Yes.
So really,
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time and your insight. It's been wonderful, and we really appreciate you guys being here. And dude, you stepped up with about 3 hours notice, and it was perfect.
This is literally what we'd be talking about anyway on a Thursday night. So no problem at all.
Well,
Thanks for having me.
it was seamless and really appreciate it. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Well done.